Welcome to the Meditation Conversation, the podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and yay, Michael Massey is back. Michael has been a frequent guest over the years on Meditation Conversation, and in this episode, we cover a wide range of topics centered around the evolution of humanity. Michael's getting a lot of insights about our evolution speeding up, and we talk about the solar flares and magnetic changes that indicate big changes are happening. And we also get into the individual experiences, such as new memory recall and moving beyond a dualistic perspective. And we talk about what it might be like as societal structures give way to higher dimensional solutions to things like the healthcare system. So be sure you check out karagoodwin.com, where you can get a free 10-minute meditation. If you want support for your meditation practice, I have a 21-day online program to help you develop your own practice. And there's also the Healing Hearth membership, where you can get live online assistance with your questions about meditation and life. I also have a recorded sacred geometry workshop series available. All of that and more on karagoodwin.com. And now, enjoy this episode. Hey, Michael, how are you?
All right, Kara, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. I think it's been forever. I think the last time you were on was episode 333, which was
when was
a while
that?
ago. I think I released 354 or 5 lately.
Wow. Okay. So like 6 months or something?
Maybe.
Wow.
That's weird.
I know it is.
And in that time, you got a new shirt. So if anybody's watching the video, you have to see Michael's shirt. It is, if you're not watching the video, you're missing out. You can always go on themeditationconversation.com and see the video. He's got a full moon, 2 UFOs, Sasquatch, and an alien. And the Sasquatch and the alien are holding hands. So there's like, it hits all the bases.
Yes.
Love it.
It's my official work shirt, that I do my tours in.
Ah, yes. They're in Sedona, your Vortex tours.
Correct.
All right. I bet you get some good comments on those.
I do.
It's been a long time, as we said, and I love to just catch up with you and see what is happening energetically in your world and the field reports that you're getting. You and I connected last week and shared some, things that each of us were experiencing, a lot of things happening in the dream time, and some energetic things. And what say ye? What's going on in Michael world?
Wow. The 2024 has just been remarkable. And from a personal level in terms of consciousness, and for those who've tuned into some of the prior podcasts, we've talked about like the new planetary grid that has been activated over the past few years that leads to a corresponding new kind of operating system for human consciousness. I've called it the Trinity-based operating system, that humanity is evolving from aging up, if you will, from 2 to 3, as we grow beyond the duality-based thinking into a Trinity-based thinking. So these all of that's backstory for those that have heard us talking about this over the years. So all of this just seems to be coming in a manifest reality this year in 2024 with just such an exquisite and beautiful way. And
before you go too far, let's review the Trinity-based thinking and the change from duality to Trinity.
Let's review this in 20 seconds or less, or
there's no rush, whatever you think.
For as long as we can, we're all familiar with this duality-based thinking, right? And now there's a lot of talk about unity-based consciousness. It's remembering, and ultimately this is truth, that the the unified field, which exists and yet is beyond our perception for the most part, except through moments of a spiritual awakening to that unified field. And what's happening is the vessel, the human vessel, and its consciousness in a duality based format. It's always toggling back and forth. It's not a stable form, and so it's always a this that back and forth. And with the evolution or the graduation beyond the terrible twos, and it's weird, it's how this is mirrored and reflected in our, in the human lifespan, moving graduating beyond the terrible twos and into when we turn three, we're basically able to natively think within our consciousness in threes, and this enables us to then triangulate onto the unity. And so we can have a stable consciousness that's able to maintain contact and communication with the unified field.
Okay, so there were a lot of engineering terms in there.
Surprise.
For just a person who is interested in spiritual development, but maybe doesn't have a lot of background in like even maybe what a unified field is, why is it important to have like why do we care about having a Trinity-based perspective and consciousness?
Because why do we care?
Yeah.
Well, if anybody cares about at some point in time entering into a new golden age where we finally achieve peace on Earth, this is necessary. So as long as we're stuck in the terrible twos, there's going to be war and conflict.
Oh,
There's just
that.
it's just that.
Oh, just that.
Yeah,
Okay.
just that. So in a sense, the future of the human race depends on it.
And so, but that's because it's this either or. Like we tend to see things as it's either this thing or it's that thing. And then if it's not the thing that we align with, then there's no room for it, or we want to have aggression towards it, or is it bigger than that?
Um, Aggression towards what are we talking
The
about here?
other, the other. When we see separation, when we experience
Oh,
separation.
separation. Yeah, right. And yeah, and so yeah, exactly. The separation, the other isn't an illusion, it's the separation that's the illusion.
Mm.
And and so yeah, when the barriers of separation, that's ultimately what the Trinity-based operating system is, allows for that third perspective within one's own consciousness, so you don't get stuck in that separation thing. It's like having always multiple paths to make a connection.
Mm. Okay. So hopefully that's clear now of what you're even talking about with Trinity consciousness, unity consciousness. So
It
lately, oh, go ahead.
Ultimately, it's understand that we're in part of it. This is a big process of a natural evolution that's also a supernatural evolution, if you will, because we're evolving the human the human vessel, the human energy system into its next level form. And as such, then we're talking about becoming something that was not even known. It's necessarily bringing that which is unknown into the known. We're expanding in a way that's, I say, difficult to predict. It's easy to predict that it's happening, but the experience of it is astounding, and it's full of wonder. And so this is all happening, and part of this, there's all these natural cycles, and we're witnessing this too. And we kind of tie in terms of what's been happening here even recently in 2024 in terms of, the cosmic and planetary and solar system and what's happening with that.
So tell us more about what you're observing in 2024 in terms of, you're talking about like the solar system, cosmic. We also know from a social perspective, there's been a lot of change. And then I imagine there in Sedona, because you're kind of in this like spiritual hub for the planet, one of them. Um, I imagine, you're seeing changes there too, as well.
Yeah. And I think just about everybody, and of course, I'm doing tours, and whenever I ask people, no matter where they're from, everybody is reporting, climates are weird and changing. And of course, our news reports are confirming this, whether it's floods or tornadoes, extreme weather events and all these kinds of things, right? So what I find really fascinating is like, okay, so I've been have I been talking about the Earth's magnetic field for a while?
Yes,
Yes, like
yeah, you have, and we had a workshop on it, like, in 2020, I
I
think.
know, right? Yes.
Yes.
I'm like, hey, this is what's going on, folks, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, mark my words, we're going to be, hearing more of this in the future. Now, just it's really fascinating. I think with the advancement of AI and whatnot, a new analytical model it was recently developed to then analyze a bunch of seismic data, and they started analyzing all this historic seismic data and have discovered that circa 2010 is when the core of the Earth started slowing down. Now, and this is right around the time frame that I've been that I was been telling people that, hey, we got something going on with the magnetic field, and it's entering. We're entering into a pole flip. And of course, this year in 2024, with all the auroras and stuff we have the Earth, or the sun is executing its magnetic pole flip this year. So that's why we have all the solar flares, all the aurora activity and whatnot. And then some of the other data that's coming out now is showing that yes, global temperatures are on the rise, as have been expected to be, but it's outpacing any effects that are coming from what we call the greenhouse gas effect or carbon emissions. So the planet is warming based on a cycle that it's in that is superseding any impact that us humans are actually doing.
Hmm.
So it's of course not an excuse for us to go out and do whatever we want. We want to take care of this planet to the best of our ability, for sure. But that we're part of this cycle that's happening that's way bigger than us.
Mm. Wow.
So this is all recent. And I'm over here finally going, yes, yes, you know, okay, the pieces are coming together, and the whole scientific community and things are coming together to support this greater understanding of what's actually happening with our planet.
Hmm.
Now we scientifically now we know have very little understanding of the impact of changing magnetic fields on the human being. But it's another little prediction that within another 5 or 10 years we'll know a whole lot more.
Right. And just as a little bit of a background, Michael, when was the last time the planet experienced a pole shift?
Oh, well, it's happened over many times over the course of history, and we look at the magnetic orientation of iron deposits in rocks and lava flows going back in time. That's how we kind of figured this out, and it happens on average about every 200,000 years. The last time that it happened was 780,000 years ago. So we're like way overdue.
And we don't have access to the news reports from
No,
780,000 years ago to know how it went.
no, no. The best what we have is those layers of rock that we have to kind of decode. But that's that doesn't give you a very precise, you know, play by play, day by day of what a pole flip is about.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so that's the scientific, earthly, solar system piece to all of it.
mhm.
How does that relate to where we started with that Trinity consciousness and how it affects like human consciousness or what people and what you're experiencing, what people might be experiencing now with this shift? How do those things go together?
Well, I remember seeing or having a vision, or I was really looking kind of at the pattern of the fabric, and I understood this is maybe, I'd say going back good maybe 12, 13 years. And I was like, oh, wow, when there's shift that's common, I'm like, wow, there's going to be a lot of people lose their minds. I'm like, wow, there's, it's going to be, there's going to be crazy folks all over. And now here we are, 15 years later, in the midst of this like global mental health crisis. It's not just one thing you can point to, of course, because it's very, there's a whole lot that's going on. But certainly, what for those the importance of doing the spiritual work and doing your inner work is for this reason. You see, those who haven't and aren't and haven't broken through to any of these illusions of separation, this is what we're witnessing. So, the importance of this, is it's all that, everything that's happening dramatically speaking is there. Even the wars themselves are there to facilitate people making a breakthrough to connect with their spiritual body. Because that's the one thing. It's like that's fundamentally critical throughout this is that we all have a spiritual body, whether you're aware of it or not. But the future is connected to it. It's not separation from it. There is no future without it. And so everything in terms of the dramatically is serving the purpose of making uh, such that individuals at that level can make that connection.
Well, it's fascinating talking about the mental state and, the planet that playing into that. I was reading or hearing something recently, or not too recently, but within the last couple of months that talked about, I don't know if it was a hypothesis that memories are held in our magnetics. Like we have memories through magnetically. Did you tell
Mhm.
me that? Or have you
Um,
heard this?
oh, I've seen it.
You've seen it
I've known this for quite some time. Yeah,
because
yeah. Different.
wherever I came across this, it was suggesting that magnetics are holding our memories. And of course, so much of our identity is tied up in what we remember about ourselves, and our
Uh,
history.
it's what we remember, and we tend to take a selective memory is how we form our identity, right? For better or worse. So we're either going to take our best stuff, and that's how we weave, a little narrative of that's who we really are, or we might do the worst. And there's a lot of people that unfortunately do that too, where they're just plucking out just the worst stuff, and they're basing a sense of self around that. God help those souls. So usually it's some kind of partial, selection of our memory. Now you start actually impeding that memory access, and then what happens? People they don't know who they are, right?
Yeah.
It's like moving the furniture around, and if you're blind, that's a problem,
Mm, yeah. Well,
right?
it's interesting to think how memory plays into this too, because I remember a year or two ago you talking about access to kind of new memories that you hadn't remembered for a long time. And Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember talking about, yeah, that's one of been the enhancements I've seen in a significant regard over the last 12 months, really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
it's
I
memory
noticed that
access.
yeah, I noticed that within myself too, where and it seems to come out of nowhere, where
Mm,
suddenly I just remember being very, very, very young in my like I the other day it was like
yeah,
going to take a nap at my babysitter's house
yeah,
and really not wanting to go take a nap. And I remembered like the bedroom and the bed and trying to fall asleep, and it made me even wonder, like, because that you sleep a lot when you're young, and I've had a few recollections of, like, trying to fall asleep and being, like, nervous, being, like, not feeling comfortable, and it makes me kinda wonder about, like, um, abductions, because they're, uh I don't know, just the more I learn about these things, the more I'm like, I wonder where that came from, that, like, not wanting to fall asleep. It could be as simple as just fear of missing out, if other people were around, like, "I don't wanna go, I wanna party."
yeah,
Just things like that where I'm like, yeah, I'm remembering, like, falling asleep at night at my house and this raccoon, like, octagonal picture drawing thing that we had that I would look at going when I was falling asleep, and it kinda creeped me out, and then I'm like now at this vantage point, I'm like, "Was there a portal there? Why didn't I like that?" But anyway, all these that's just one example where I'm like, "Why am I suddenly remembering this thing that doesn't seem to be relevant necessarily right now and just so young?"
yeah, I know. And, this is such a subjective thing because I don't really know. You can't really know for sure how other people experience their memories
True. Yeah.
100%, right? So hence we talk about this kind of thing. But like now, there's like fact recall where you haven't even think, have you been to Disney World? You've been to Disney
Yes.
World, right? So you might remember that you've been to Disney World. Okay. That's different than the full visceral memory that comes back where all of a sudden you get the feeling of being there,
Mhm.
whether you're a kid or whatever age you happen to have the memory recall where, and then it's like the details of it and the feeling, even your brain that you can start to smell it and sense it, and your other senses are accessing or activating, and so you're getting this full sensory experience of that memory. And then that connection, it's particularly is when these come up from childhood because it's reminding us of certain these emotional states that we may not have felt since then.
Mm.
And once we reconnect to that emotional state, we can actually have that state again. I'm feeling, and I feel like personally, like, I think I've been at this for a while, and yet what's transpiring right now, I feel like we're just at the beginning of
Mm.
it. It's just gonna get just deliciously epic. And so it's like brick by brick, I feel myself move becoming more of that kid, that child, but like the divine child, it's an integrated thing. So I'm an adult, but a full range of access to the whole emotional state that we're really gifted with when we were born and came forth here.
I love that. It brings up so many things that going back to being a child, and I know there's a biblical verse about that too, which you
Yeah,
probably have access to off the top of your head.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Jesus said, unless you become like one of these the children, right? You won't enter the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
Yeah,
And that is something that comes up with these memories too, like you say, is that feeling of being a child. And I remember being a child and trying to figure out how to be a grown-up, and that even causing me some concern that I wouldn't figure it out, because they were so different. And they didn't seem to have that, they had so much control over their feelings as one example, or the things that they worried about, I didn't even think about, it's like, well, what are bills and what are meetings and, what's rush hour, all these things that I'm like, am I ever going to learn all that? And, you know, and
Yeah.
and this recognition, as you say, like the deeper you go in your spirituality, the more you realize that purity and that innocence of just being a human that we unlearn, or we like get conditioned and we buy into this other type of living that has all these conditions, that has all these like things that as a grown up you take for granted as just how it is. But this part of the awakening is that like coming back to spending time, like prioritizing even fresh air, noticing the bees on a flower, noticing the wind, noticing the way that it smells when you go out and take a walk, or, just these things that we do naturally pay attention to as a child that it's like we get all these layers of nonsense that we agree that are going to be part of our perception that really take us away out of our spiritual body, our spirit body, as you mentioned before.
Yeah. You must unlearn what you have learned, says Yoda, right? And the irony of it, of, yeah, wait a second, I was this way naturally, and then I become not this way, and then the return to being that way again. And ultimately, it's a natural process. As we all progress through this kind of transition, it's a choice based, and those who make the choice to what I call living on the vertical. So the whole of time, I mean, is like if you imagine it as a river, and so each individual life starts at some point along this river, and it's gonna go a certain distance down that river, and then before it ends its journey, and then the river flows on. And so you can look at the whole course of human history, natural history, whatever. It's just this movement along this river of time. And within an individual life, it might even be scripted or destined what length of that river, that lifespan is going to go. But what may not, but the actual individual path of the way it takes through various different rapids or navigating down that river might vary, but there's an overall architecture for it, or an intent of that soul's purpose to basically go from this point to the river to this point to the river. Is that tracking that so far?
Yes.
That's how the majority of people just experience that. That's the whole flow of life. Now, what I call living on the vertical has to do with that spiritual connection, and it becomes this point where instead of just you're just caught up in the river and flowing with it. It's like breaking your head up out of water and establishing a connection that's at a perpendicular to the flow of time. And so this is essentially ultimately the gateway to the eternal. And so which is the very nature of the spiritual body. So when you connect with your spiritual body, it's going to pop you out of the flow of time onto what this vertical. They say a spectrum. Once one actually becomes aware of that vertical, that spiritual component, and then from there, there's a whole like range or levels of mastery of that. But just becoming aware of it is all. It's like getting as soon as you become aware of your spiritual body, it's like having a life preserver. Now you're in the river, but now you got a lifeboat or a life preserver. So you can't drown anymore. And then if you progress it further, you'll get a raft or a kayak, right? Now you see you'll still be in the same river with everybody else floating down, but having a very different experience than everyone else. And ultimately, here's the thing too, and this is something that I feel like it's 2024. It's certain things it seems like it's fair to share now that maybe not weren't okay to share before. And one of them has to do with mastery, because there's a typical when people are on this this journey, right? The gurus and the spiritual masters and so forth and so on. We've talked about those on a few different podcasts, have we not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you see, there's plenty of, and more are going to come of the documentaries out there of like how these things turn into cults and right,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's like beware, okay, beware any master you know that's outside yourself, right? So here's the question, and I think most people like, well, what is like say what is spiritual mastery? How does one become a spiritual master? I have a feeling this is a question that I had, and I'm like, where do you get the answer to it, and how will I know that who's a master and who's not, and etc. Right? Here's like the nitty gritty of it. Okay, is that mastery is not something that is awarded. It's something that is claimed. And it begins the moment that anyone, you as a person, as an individual, claims responsibility for their experience. This is the essence of self mastery. See, you know that now no longer can you point fingers and blame at anything, because you know that you and you alone are 100% responsible for your experience and your emotional state. So mastery is something that's claimed. As soon as one claims it, it's akin to getting that life preserver. Because now you know. Now it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect at it. And just claiming mastery doesn't mean that you're great. It just means it's like, okay, I might still be at this inclination to say blame others when stuff doesn't go the way I want to. But if I do, then having already claimed mastery, that's going to come back on me. And so then it becomes that process of refinement and self-correction such that you actually stabilize that. And then it's, and then as it progresses forward, there's those subsequent upgrades to better and better craft to navigate the river.
I love that.
But for anyone out there who's wondering who the master is, it's you. You just have to claim it. But
Right.
understand, you got to do it. I mean, you got to do it wholeheartedly. You got to make the choice from here. And understanding that you can say, okay, if it's a self master or master of life or spiritual master, those are basically three things of the same thing. They all converge to the same point.
And I think too, that ego claiming it versus being in spirit and claiming, from that vertical, like you're saying, where if we're dipping a toe in and it's like, oh, okay, I can get to spiritual mastery. I just have to say I'm a master. And it's like, well, if you haven't
Yeah.
like dealt with your ego yet, and I think that's where we do get a lot of problems with the cults, where there are these people who are claiming their
Yeah.
own mastery. They're happy to step into it, but they're doing so from the egoic standpoint, and then they need more and more and more of that power. They need more people coming in to verify or to validate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the funny thing. And then you get this, you kind of learn this. That's why You're like, okay, you claim you're a master to yourself, you claim it to the universe, but you don't make that claim to other. You go around saying I'm a master.
Yeah.
You masters don't do that, right? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, no, it's the thing. It's is the stuff that we know that we don't talk about.
It's so funny because you talk about the documentaries and so forth, and I stumbled upon a documentary last night that I started watching on HBO. I can't remember. It's about this way down. It's a like a Christian offshoot that started as a weight loss program. But then the leader, it was like down in Tennessee, but I guess it spread all over the world. And but this woman who was the leader, like she created this church and got rid of the Trinity, funnily enough. So it's funny that we started with that, where she was like, no, just go straight to God. Don't have this Trinity. That was a big point of
Uh,
contention for a lot of people.
okay.
But
Yeah.
she's very like it's a very much like a punishment base. If you're God will punish you if you're or maybe it's more like you're the chosen one, so God will take care of you. And I've gotten to a point in the series where her grandchild dies as a child. And the next day they go, this woman who must have left now the cult, but she's like, they basically had all these individual sessions with the people of, who were like the workers basically, because they knew that the family was perfect, so they weren't being punished. So they had to figure out who was out of alignment, or however they put it, within the staff of, within like the people who were close to the inner circle, but not the family, because that must be why God would punish them. It wasn't something that the family did. It wasn't something the leader did, because they were, as in the context of this discussion, they were masters. They were happy to claim that mastery, but they weren't ready to take the responsibility and say, okay, by this philosophy that I am that I'm preaching to everybody, that if as long as they're perfect enough, God will love them and won't punish them. And they were seeing this as a punishment, but then they weren't ready to claim the responsibility.
Nah, nah. So these are, yeah. So that's not really claiming mastery now, is it?
Right. But that's an example of like the egoic,
Yeah.
like how the
Yeah.
ego can get in the way and confuse things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it's one of the reasons why I mentioned it's 2024 now, and it seems to be okay to talk about. There's a certain number of things that I haven't, I haven't really talked about over the years because of that thing. Because if there's the ego false interpretation of what's said, it's like, that's a potential pitfall. It's like I'd be careful not to say something because it could get misconstrued, and then I'd be like, oh no, right? Something feels different now. It feels like something has happened, and I mean that there's been a major victory spiritual in the spiritual plane, where like the like vast minions of darkness have been wiped out.
Mm.
And it's really interesting, but I'm like, all of a sudden it's okay to talk certain things, or it's like certain knowledge can be shared now, certain things, ideas can be spread, certain things can happen now that couldn't even happen just a few months ago. And I'm just watching this unfold with interest, curiosity, but it's like, wow, it's something big is really, really happening.
That's fascinating. I know within my own world, one of the things, because we started by talking about kind of the all the big changes and how like the magnetics of the planet and
Mhm.
how all of that is kind of being set up to shift. This has been predicted for a while. And one of the things that's often talked about is like the crumbling of systems. And that with
Mhm.
this major change, it will be kind of the almost like the crumbling of the systems that we take for granted. So financial system is often talked about, that the financial system will undergo a huge overhaul,
Mhm.
healthcare, um, and, education and all of these things will have like, we'll just operate at a totally different level. And a lot of times there are warnings about how destructive that could be. Like, get ready, stock up,
Yeah.
what have you. But
Yeah.
I believe, that our choices and our consciousness play a role in that and what we call forth. But anyway, aside from all of that, something that has come into my purview because I've wondered about like, well, how would that happen in a sort of gentle way? Um, but I've been looking into, do you want to say something?
Yeah, there's a way for it to happen. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure there are multiple ways, but I had a very like tangible experience. I've done this. I've kind of started looking into homeopathy as a layperson. I'm not going to be a homeopath or anything like that, but I've just been looking into it and the potential of it and how it started. And, I've just seen all of these things that give me hope. And through, not that everything's going to become homeopathic, but it's been this like, "Oh, this could spread like rapid fire." Again, not necessarily homeopathy, but like masses of people realizing, um, that there is like solid foundation for these modalities that are inexpensive, that are time tested. Homeopathy's been around a lot longer than pharma, or at least in conjunction.
Hmm.
It started in like the 1850s. I think even earlier than that, in the 1800s. Um, but it's like individual choice. And I'm noticing this. I'm seeing so many people who are coming to me, even though I don't have like I'm not like the right person to come and necessarily ask health issues. Um, I'm not gonna know like, oh, try this medicine or or whatever. But I have so many people who are like, okay, I've reached the allopathic end. Like there's not anything more that my family doctor can offer me. And I want to know what else is out there. And they don't even know enough to know like, oh, I could try homeopathy or I could try Reiki or I could try a chiropractor, or, it's like they aren't even sure like where they might go or what other options there might be. But I'm seeing like so many people in my world approaching me, not me going and saying, "Oh, I hear you're having this problem. Try this other branch of, healing." Um, and it just makes me think like the more people who do that and talk about it and other people start exploring, the more the demand goes for those types of things. I mean, it sounds really obvious, but it just pulls the rug out of conventional, you know, systems, let's say. What's your take
Yeah.
on it?
Well, I mean, we've definitely in the last what 15 years. I mean, think about the how many more yoga studios, meditation groups, spiritual wellness centers. How many more of those there are now than there were 15, 20 years ago? It's it's remarkable. And the other to your point also is that you see, because with the kind of this quantum evolution as we're evolving to our next version of who we are as humans, but this importance of that connection to the spiritual body. There's an enormous amount of strength and power that comes. It's mind-boggling that comes from the spiritual body. And so, how many are you talking about? Some of the homeopathic type of things you see, but you could have something that works at a physical level that helps open up doors or connections to the spiritual body. So the actual healing power isn't coming from the so much from anything at the physical level, so much as that it's helping to establish that connection to the spiritual body where the strength to heal comes from.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, that's a whole field of like, there's how much research has been done into that, next to nil, because we don't even have ways to really quite measure that. But that's 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 how things have been, but I don't see how that's how things are going to be.
Right.
And the advancements in knowledge, and then as we're evolving our consciousness, we're going to be gifted with increasing abilities to perceive these greater mysteries and see the connection between these things that we haven't been able to see before. And then that leads to, whew, a whole new era of
Yeah.
medicine and science and
Right.
engineering and all kinds of things. But it's this time it's based on that inclusive component of that spiritual body.
Right. And that's one of the fascinating things that I'm finding with homeopathy is that it considers that, just like Chinese medicine considers qi, that
Yeah,
that subtle body.
right,
But like with
right.
homeopathy, they're taking, so you may have like the remedy, let's say it's snake venom, just
Right.
as an odd one. But they'll take like 1 part per 100. And so you
Yeah.
might have 100 drops of water, 1 part snake venom, and you shake that up or strike it against something for a while. And then you take
Mhm.
1 drop of that dilution in 100 parts of water or 99 parts of water, shake it, and you keep doing that. The more you dilute it, eventually there's not a single molecule of the remedy,
Yeah.
but it becomes so much stronger. The more you dilute it, the more potent it becomes, which is really hard to wrap your head around if you're not willing to take into account other dimensional aspects of yourself. That it's working on a non-physical, like, where is it gone and why is it so powerful? Why is it so much more powerful the more you dilute it to where you
Hmm.
actually can't even find the molecule, but it's having a very specific effect. And so it really does beg that inclusion of invisible, like non-material aspects of ourselves that are healing through it, which is just fascinating.
Like magic.
It kind of is.
And it kind of is. Yeah. And, this, what we concept, what we experience as magic is when we witness something that arrives in a dimension that we couldn't previously see. So whenever something shows up from somewhere we didn't see, that's what we go, that's magic,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
right. It's fascinating.
Well,
Oh,
get ready, folks, because there's a lot of magic and it's going to roll in because the stuff that's coming in from dimensions unseen is,
let's have it.
and there's no indication of it stop. And again, like I say, we're at the beginning. That's what's astounding.
Right. And you see that as being like a decades long process, centuries long,
Well, here's
months
the
long.
all of it, but we're in a certain window of time where it's like greatly accelerated to make this transition or this evolution, which is at an individual level. So it might take, who knows, whatever, it takes a couple years or something like that. So it can happen anywhere in, an overall, maybe it's 100-year period. Maybe it's 1,000 years. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But what we're seeing is the it's like spreading like wildfire though. So
That's exciting.
yeah, yeah. So at some point in time, there's the so-called 100th monkey effect, right? You hit some kind of critical threshold where all of a sudden, boom, and then we collectively we make an advancement. Then, but what kind of to your point earlier when I said that there's a way for this all to happen, it's kind of this is what I'm talking about here. See, I don't foresee right now the doomsday scenarios where like when we were somehow a global apocalypse kind of thing. I don't really see that happening. But individually, you could still live out an apocalypse reality. You see, so think of it as almost like a video game system where you can subscribe to all of these various different narratives. The overall, this planet and the whole experience can serve up all of them during this period. So you can live out any number of these different experiences. But I don't see that it's not like the whole world's going to be in a doomsday.
Yeah. Okay.
But individually, or even groups of people can experience a doomsday narrative comes to play for them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You understand? Sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So I see like this is where it's kind of important to not get too attached to any version of collective reality as being absolute.
Yeah.
Collective reality is not absolute reality.
Right. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot there. Thank you.
Yeah. We hit a couple interesting notes there, I think.
Yes, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's always a joy to have you. You always blow our minds when you come on and share. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. Hey, let's do it again sometime.
Yes, we'll do it again soon, sooner than this time.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meditation Conversation with special guest Michael Massey. I'd be so grateful if you would share this episode with someone in your life who would appreciate it. Your sharing helps build momentum and make high vibrational content such as this more accessible and easier to find. I'd also be so grateful for you to subscribe to this content. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the next meditation conversation.